It's time for Go Veggie with Kay. Vegetarian cooking for your good health. Now, here's Kay Stepkin.
Hello, and welcome to Go Veggie with Kay. I'm Kay Stepkin, and we're here in the demonstration kitchen at Whole Foods Market in Evanston, Illinois. Today, I'm going to be showing you our Tofu More recipes, Mexican style, which includes tofuquillas, a cucumber salad, chunky guacamole, and a great little galleta or cookie. All of these are south of the border favorites of mine. And a little bit later, we're going to hear from Dr. Joel Fuhrman. He's a physician and a renowned vegetarian author. I had the great pleasure of meeting him recently, and he has some very enlightening and certainly important matters to discuss about vegetarian diets. We're going to start with the tofuquillas. You might notice that this recipe actually uses two different products, both from the soybean, tofu and soy sauce, which I'll talk a little more about. Now, tofu has very little flavor, and so it's best to marinate it. If you don't have time to marinate it for a couple of hours, you might do what I'm going to be doing right now, which is mixing the tofu into the marinating liquid, and then putting it in the oven while I finish the rest of the dish. That way, the tofu soaks up all of the great flavor of the marinade. Our marinade consists of olive oil, tamari. Now, tamari is a kind of soy sauce. Actually, in Japan, soy sauce is called shoyu, or shoyu. And it was given, George Osawa, who was a macrobiotic leader, came up with the name tamari to distinguish this naturally processed tamari from the chemically processed variety that unfortunately is now used in most of Japan today. It's made of low-quality soybeans, refined salt, and is even artificially aged. So that's why you might hear me interchange the words tamari, shoyu, and soy sauce. Going to whisk the marinade, add some fresh garlic. Use this little tiny, I don't know what to call it, a tool to get the garlic out. And some turmeric. Turmeric is often used in East Indian cooking, but it imparts a sort of yellowish color to the tofu. So there's our marinade. I'm going to hold the tofu together as I cut it, and that way I will get very even little pieces exactly the way I want them. Cut it in one direction, then another direction. Notice I'm using a serrated knife rather than my chef's knife. It just, the tofu seems to hold together better that way. Now when I cut it across in the last direction, it's in just the right size pieces. So there's our tofu, and I don't make it too big because I think it'll get more of the flavor of the marinade if I leave it a little smaller. Okay. Gonna stir this tofu into the marinade. Sometimes if you have tofu and you didn't like it, the person cooking it, sometimes even in a restaurant, they don't really know to marinate tofu, or they might not marinate it long enough. Just going to stir it up here. And then I'm going to put it in what's called a half of a hotel pan and just throw it right in the oven while I'm preparing the rest of the dish. Oh, does this smell good? I guess it's the garlic and the soy sauce. Okay, half a hotel pan. Of course, you don't have to oil it because there's oil in the marinade. Want to get every drop of marinade out. I hate to waste it because that's just eliminating some of the flavor. Okay, I don't even have to cover this. I'm just going to put it in the oven. 15, 20 minutes is nice, but however long you have, the tofu will start to brown, and it's going to get firmer, which gives it a nicer texture. The oven, by the way, is at 375. While the tofu is marinating in the oven, I'm going to very lightly oil this cast iron pan in order to saute the onions that are going to go into the tofuquilla dish. The pan was preheated before I put the oil in. We're going to saute these onions which will add great flavor to the dish. Now, instead of buying tortilla chips that you often find in this kind of a dish, we're going to make our own tortilla chips. And again, we're going to be using a lot less oil. They're not deep fried. They're lightly pan fried. About 90% of our soy and corn products in this country are genetically engineered. So with very rare exception, I buy organic soy and corn products. Tortillas, one of my few exceptions. The only organic tortillas that you can find in Chicago are coming in from the West Coast, frozen, and then wrapped in plastic to boot. That is so unnecessary when we are so lucky in Chicago to have a large Mexican community and several, not one, but several tortilla making factories. You can buy fresh tortillas, or I should say tortillas in Chicago so fresh that you're actually buying them warm and then wrapped in paper instead of plastic. So we will saute these ourselves. Just going to keep stirring these onions. We don't want them to burn. We want to see how they're browning. You can brown them a little bit. And I'm going to turn these tortilla chips, if you can see this, they're starting to curl. That's an indicator that they're probably a little bit brown on the bottom. And then I'll turn it. There are two kinds of tofu that you're going to find in the store. The kind on the shelf is more highly processed. It's creamier, and people like to use it in desserts because it's so creamy. However, the refrigerated one is fresher. And I find that if you blend it in the food processor or the blender long enough, it gets just as creamy as the aseptically packaged tofu that's on the shelf. So now I use the kind of tofu we have here today. I use it for everything. You can keep tofu fresh in a number of ways. You can change the water daily. You can even freeze tofu. Be sure that after you defrost it, that you squeeze all the water out of it. It's interesting because, when it's frozen, because it actually gets a different texture and it absorbs marinades even better. If you find that the tofu is starting to smell a little bit lemony, you can put it in boiling water for 5 minutes, and that can freshen it up also. I'm going to remove the first batch of tortilla chips. No salt, very little oil. And let's get this out. And we'll crisp up our second batch. I'm going to mix the tomatillo sauce into the crisped up tortillas. The tomatillo is a relative of the red tomato. It has a very tart flavor. And tomatilla actually means little tomato in Spanish. This sauce is made right here in Chicago, has a minimum amount of ingredients, and is very, very tasty. Just going to mix that right in. And this is going to impart a very nice flavor to these chips without the oil. We can now saute the tofu. We'll just get this pan hot again. I'm going to add a little more oil. We're going to brown and crisp the tofu even further by putting it in the oiled pan. It's already firmed up in the oven. You're just going to love the texture of this, as well as the flavor from the marinade. I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of paprika, which will help it brown up. And while this is getting a little browner, I'll show you how to slice the tomato. Now, this is a plum tomato rather than a regular tomato because it's less juicy. And this dish does not have to be very, very wet. I am just taking out the core here. We'll use the rest of this tomato. Just going to slice it lengthwise and then across. There are 4 tomatoes in the dish, but I just wanted to show you with the one. And there we go. Very good. Going to add the onions. Oh, this tofu looks and smells just heavenly. Going to add the onions. And going to put a little soy sauce or tamari, as we had talked about, into the tomatoes just to flavor them a little bit more. This is about a teaspoon of tamari. Everything's going to wind up going back into this skillet. I'm sure you can hear this. I wish you could smell it. Then we'll add back our tortilla chips, which have picked up on the flavor of the tomatillo sauce. And I'm going to add the herbs last. Never, ever, ever buy dried basil. I don't know why they sell it. It should be against the law. When basil gets dried, even if you dry it yourself at home, it winds up tasting like tree bark. So always use fresh basil. Great aroma. But even with fresh, you notice I'm adding it at the end of the cooking time because too much heat can hurt the flavor also. And cilantro, a great south of the border herb. This is our dish. There we have it, the tofuquillas. Guacamole. It's going to go wonderful with our tofuquillas, as well as we actually have some tortillas left over from making the tofuquillas, and I'll show you how to heat them up on the stove, and we can spread the guacamole on it. It's a great snack. I've even eaten it as a main dish. We're going to start by squeezing some fresh lime juice. This is a reamer that can get the juice out of limes or lemons, and you don't really need it. You could squeeze it by hand. It just gets all the juice out. And limes are sort of small and really not as juicy as a lemon, so it's good to use. So 2 tablespoons of lime juice, and we need a little bit more than that 1 lime. It's good when you're squeezing a lime or a lemon to really press down hard first, and that breaks the little membranes inside the lime, and then you'll get more juice out of it. Of course, you could also use an electric orange juice squeezer, but for such a little amount, it doesn't seem worth it. So there we go, 2 tablespoons of lime juice, little red onion. The red onions are a little bit sweeter than the white onions, and that's why I'm using them, since we're going to be eating them raw. A little bit of sea salt. I don't know if you can see on the television screen, but it's a slightly gray color, and that indicates all the minerals that are still in the sea salt. It's not processed too much. So just stir this around, and everything else we're going to stir in. 1 plum tomato. We're using the plum tomato for the same reason we used it in the tofuquillas, because it's a little bit drier than a regular tomato, and you don't want too much, you don't want to add a lot of liquid to guacamole. Although the recipe calls for 2 avocados, whenever I use avocados in a dish, I start with 1 or 2 extra. You never know when you're going to cut into it, and sometimes the inside might be a little bit spoiled and you can't use it. I'm slicing around it with a paring knife. Then you can pull it apart real easily. If you can't pull it apart easily, the avocado was probably a little too firm to start with. I'm just going to scoop it right into the dish. This is perfect. How beautiful. Scoop it right in. Take that big old seed out. This is just fine. Take out the seed. Scoop around that second brown spot. Almost a perfect avocado. Now I'm going to use a potato masher. Makes it a lot easier than a fork. And we'll mash the avocado. I don't like it, I like it chunky. In fact, that's the name of it, chunky guacamole. So we'll leave some big pieces in it. And now I will just stir in the tomatoes. Serrano pepper. This is sort of a medium hot pepper, which I like. I remove the seeds because I don't like it too hot. But if it's a little too much for you, you could use jalapeno pepper or you could use a stronger pepper. And fresh cilantro, which I always love. And I'll just mix that up. It's that simple. I also want to show you how to use this. So you could just scoop this right on top of the tofu quillas, but you could also make the most wonderful snack by heating tortillas. Hopefully you have a gas stove, not an electric one. And tortillas are packaged 12 to a pack usually, or 11. And we had a few left over when we made our tofu quillas. I'm just going to brown this. Maybe make that a little bit higher. This is really good as a snack. I've even eaten these as a main dish. We're going to put the guacamole on it. If you have hummus at home or baba ganoush, any kind of a spread is wonderful in tortillas. There you go. You can see it started to brown a little bit. Then I'm going to spread it on here and show you how to eat it. Okay. It's that simple. Here's our guacamole. You can just roll it up. You can serve it with the tofu quillas, or that's wonderful. There's no fat added to the guacamole, you might have noticed, and there's no fat added to tortillas either. Here's a Mexican cucumber salad with cilantro and lime. Notice that I'm using some of the same herbs, some of the same flavorings as in other dishes that we're making. I'm not using the typical slicing cucumbers that we're used to. This pickling cucumber is what it's called. Is the same species as a slicing cucumber, but they're a little bit firmer, and notice the matte finish. The slicing cucumbers are very shiny, and you think they're very attractive until you realize that the shininess comes from being waxed. Who wants to eat wax? I'm going to slice off the ends of these. And for me, an integral part of a cucumber salad is using this mandolin to slice them. I don't know why, but cucumbers always taste better to me when they're very, very thinly sliced. I bought this many years ago, and the only thing I've used it for is cucumbers. You just stick this on the end, and it gives you a very nice thin slice. How nice to be able to eat the skin, since so many nutrients lie right below the skin. And when you slice any vegetable, you can figure you are slicing off lots of the nutrients. I will just cut this. The last little part always doesn't get sliced. Marinade is olive oil. It's a good quality olive oil, dark green. It's extra virgin. Cilantro. And fresh lime juice. And sea salt. Again, a little bit darker. It's a little bit gray. Indicates the minerals. I'm going to whisk this. And then I'm just going to stir the cucumbers in. And then mix in the red pepper. Its color is very nice. As an alternate to the red pepper, you could use sliced fresh pineapple, which almost makes it taste like a different salad, but is equally delicious. And there it is, your 5-minute cucumber salad. I actually had this for breakfast this morning. I had bought some extra cucumbers. And there it is. Cucumber salad with cilantro and fresh lime juice. I promised you that we'd hear from Dr. Joel Fuhrman, one of the nation's leading physicians, specializing in vegetarian diets. I talked with him about his new and exciting book. What he had to say is fascinating. I first heard about you when I read your book, Eat to Live, which was so motivating. Can you tell everyone, what was your main message in Eat to Live?
My book, Eat to Live, is based on the nutrient per calorie density of foods. It actually is advocating people to a diet richer in nutrients, because the American diet is high in calories but low in nutrients. The most nutrient-rich foods, once you know that a hierarchy of nutrient-rich foods, you eat more nutrient-rich foods like berries, like green vegetables, like beans, like seeds, for example. As you make recipes and menu plans with a high level of these antioxidant and phytochemical-rich food, that's the mechanism via which your body no longer wants to crave eating junk food, because people don't realize that these high nutrient foods diminish the appetite, stop food cravings, and take away that addictive hunger. We eat healthy, we don't get that shakiness we don't eat. We don't get the headaches, we don't get the stomach cramping, we don't get the weakness, we don't get the mental fatigue. It stops us from trying to have to put food in our mouth all day. So the secret to successful weight loss is eating a diet rich in nutrients.
Dr. Fuhrman, how would you say that your practice is unique? It's really totally different than any medical practice I've heard of.
That's something I'm very excited about, is I have a website at drfuhrman.com, obviously my website, where I've moved a section of my practice online, where now half my time is spent advising people over the internet and answering their questions on the website. So that you can actually go onto drfuhrman.com, put your medical information in there, and you can set up a whole history of the medications you're on, what your health conditions are, and you can plot how much weight you're losing, where your cholesterol's going, where your blood pressure's going. People can get my newsletters, tutorials, they can design a menu plan for themselves, get recipe ideas, they can actually speak to other members in the forum, they can ask me questions and get their questions answered. So part of my practice is one-on-one with patients in the office, and part of my practice is writing newsletters and books and videotapes to educate people for good health. And part of my, obviously, practice is to help people with individual information and educational tools on the internet so they can make healthcare the best healthcare is self-care. It's giving them the information and education they need to take care of themselves and their family so they don't have to have medical tragedies, don't have to have heart attacks, don't have to have strokes, and don't have to have go live in a nursing home demented when they get older. I'm claiming that these diseases that afflict most Americans now are not the effects of aging. They're the effects of the toxic food environment in America. It's like the water runs off a waterfall and hits a rock and splits the rock in two after 30,000 years of the water hitting the rock. The rock didn't age. The water hit it for 30,000 years. If we eat a diet that's not well adapted to our design of our species, and we live on the American diet, which is 40% of calories from animal products, and 50% of calories from processed foods, 5% from white potato, and 4% of calories now from fruits and vegetables and beans and nuts and seeds, the foods that have those phytochemicals that build our immune system's defenses against cancer, dementia, and heart disease. If we follow that style of eating that other Americans eat, we're going to get the diseases that other Americans get.
And now we're going to end our meal with some Mexican cookies, cinnamon galletas. The basis of this cookie is whole wheat pastry flour rather than white flour. Here's some whole wheat pastry flour. Ground walnuts. This is non-dairy chocolate chips that I put in the food processor just to turn it into little pieces. It's going to be very pretty in this cookie, as you will see. The pieces of chocolate and then little specks of cinnamon. Pretty and tasty. A little baking powder without alum and some sea salt. As usual, I'm using non-hydrogenated margarine. And that is what I recommend that you use. It's non-artery clogging. Pure maple syrup. And vanilla. Then I'm going to simply dump all the dry ingredients in at once. And in that way, I will do much less stirring than if I added it little bit by little bit. Dump it in. It's faster, and your cookies will taste better. I'm going to mix the dry ingredients until the flour is just barely incorporated. These are going to be delicate and taste very, very good. You can probably start seeing the specks in here already. This will make about 12 cookies. It depends on how full you fill your scoop. Just going to scoop these out. Ooh. I'm going to use my fingers to press down on the cookies. And that way there's more surface area. They will be crisper on the outside. Then I'm just going to lay a chocolate chip in the center of each one. We're going to bake our cinnamon galletas in a preheated 375-degree oven for 11 or 12 minutes. We will soon be eating the most delicious cookie with no sugar, no white flour, tastes delicious and good for you as well. These cookies have finished baking and they've cooled for 5 minutes, and so we're ready to serve them. You might notice that I use parchment paper instead of fat or oil on the pan, and that's just to avoid problems with the cookies sticking, and it sure makes cleanup a lot easier. Delicious looking cookies. I love the little specks in them. Cinnamon galletas. Here you have it. A great collection of hot and cool dishes. Tofu and More, Mexican style. Whether you're a longtime vegetarian or are just beginning to try new ways of eating without meat, you're going to find dishes like this to be wonderful, delicious, and healthy choices. Here's hoping you'll enjoy your increased energy and well-being as you go veggie. Until next time, I'm Kay Stepkin.